Hi, welcome to the second video of a three-part series which includes using Flutter Appwrite as a backend server for a Flutter app. In the last video, we added Appwrite as a dependency into your Flutter app. In this video, we'll make a step forward and make a first request towards creating an account using your Flutter app into your Appwrite server. Now, in the last app, you saw that we have set an endpoint which was localhost version 1. So before making a request to the Appwrite server and emulator, we need to change this localhost to 10.0.2.2. So the reason why we are doing this is because the Appwrite is currently running into a Docker machine, which is a kind of a virtual machine, and the localhost is of a host machine, and this emulator is itself an virtual machine. So when this emulator will go to a local host, it will access its own local host where Appwrite is not running. We need to make sure that this Flutter app access the host localhost. Therefore, we are using 10.0.2.2, and this is only applicable if you are using an Android emulator. If you are running it on your web or on your Windows machine, you have to use localhost, right? So now, the first step towards creating an user and request is how we can create an user, right? So let's get to the documentation, and this is the documentation of Appwrite for our account API, right? Appwrite currently offers two types of APIs, which is account API and the second is users API. So what's the difference between account API and users API, right? So account API is currently used for managing a single account or a single user, like creating an user, updating an user, and creating an email session or updating a user's email ID and password, kind of that. And users API is to manage all the users in your project. It can change accessibility, delete all the users, delete some current sessions, search the activity of users, etc. etc. So for now we will be using this account API to create an account. So how do we create an account? If you look at this right page, you can see this is a section known as create account. So let's head over to this, and what does it says is that this endpoint allows you to create a new user into your project. So that's what we need, right? So let's just copy this part of code and change this web SDK to a Flutter SDK. Okay, now let's just copy this code and paste it over here, right? And we also need to create an account object. Okay, account, right, and provided the client. Now for the user ID to be unique for every user created into a project, you can use something known as id.unique. Now this create function also has a parameter known as string, but that is optional, and we would be entering a password, let's say 12345678. Please make sure you use a strong password. And if we just restart our application, what you will see, an instance of user. This line is getting printed in our debug console because we have written to print this response. So if you get over to your Appwrite console and just reload this users page, you will see that a user has been created with no name and an email ID, and it offers certain kinds of services and options like entering a name, updating the email, updating the phone, and bunch of other stuffs. Now let's say I need to create an user using a name, right? So let's just change this email ID to something else, let's say, and give it a name. I'm going to give my name, right? Now just reload this app once more, and looks like we have created a user. Head over to your Appwrite console, reload this page, and as you can see, we have created a new user. using this create email account.create API, right? Now this is how you simply create an account, right? It's as simple as that. Now how do we access our database? Now to access your database, let's again move to documentation. So in your references, you can see there is an option known as database. Select, make sure you have created a Flutter SDK, and this is the date. This is how you should create an database, right? Now what does it says that we need to create a new document before using this route. So how do we create a new document? Just go to your console, create a database, and click create database. Let's give it a name, something like my database, and leave this database ID so that it can generate a random ID. Now inside of database, you also need to create a collection of documents. So this would be like my collection, and you can create. Inside my collection, you need to define a schema, right? As in SQL, you define a schema that the data will include name, email ID, password, etc., etc. In this attributes, let's say I'm creating a single attribute of string, which is of name. It have a size of 256, don't have a default value, and it's also not required, right? So I'm creating this attribute of name. Now how can we add data inside it? So to add data inside it, you can see that we have to use this piece of code. So let's just copy it, and instead of creating an account, now we have created our account, right? So let's just remove this part of code and create a database object. So how to create a database object? Just copy this part of code. Right, now this requires two things: database ID, collection ID, and then document ID. So where we can get a database ID? This is your database ID. Click copy and paste it over here. Now you also need collection ID. So this is your collection ID. Click here and paste your collection. Now document ID can be, you can again use id.unique, and it also needs a data. So my data is simply a key value pair. So let's say I'm providing it a name, and that name is obviously my name, right? And let's just reload our app and see if we can enter some data into your database. Okay, we got an error. What does this error says? Is that access to this user is not authorized. Okay, so what you need to do before you enter some data, you need to make sure that the user has the current access to this database. So how you can do that is go to my collections, go to settings, and create a permission. So this database can be accessed by anyone, or you can say any user for my app. You can also select a particular user, you can select a particular team, or you can define your custom permission. For now, I'm creating this permission as this can be created, read, update, and deleted by any user inside my project. So just update this permissions. Let's just run our app once more. Okay, we got one more error. Let's see what does it says. A current user is not authorized to perform the requested action. Alright, where are we missing? Let's again move forward. Settings, document security is off. There's a single column. Okay, so the issue is when I defined my permissions, you can see I defined my permission for the users, but currently no user is logged inside my app, right? So it can't let anyone access the database. So I have just added one more role which says anyone can access the database, right? So once I provide this role, and let's say I've created a field Rohit Ranjan, let's say V2, and restart my app. Now let's see this document is getting added or not. Okay, now we don't have any error. Let's move to our documents, and as you can see, this is the app, this is the first document which I created, and this is the document I just created, which has a name parameter, and this is the data, right? So we have created our first account, we have created our first database. Now we can get started building an actual application, right? So the first thing you might have noticed is that everything which we are doing inside a main function, right? We can't insert our data or create an user through a Flutter app. Every time we need to create an user, we have to make changes inside this main function. This is not at all feasible. How will the users of our app create users, right? So now for that we need to create some UI so that they can enter some data, and that data can be inserted into our Appwrite server. So the first step is that I have created some, as you can see, I've created some folders like model, screen, services and widgets. Now I will also create one file which would be named as constants. Okay, the name of spelling constants.dart. Now this constants.dart will contain everything about everything ID or every endpoint of my project, right? Let's say it has an Appwrite endpoint. Now this endpoint is http 10.0.2.2/v1. Now I also need to add my project ID. And as I have created my database and collection, let's also insert our ID of our database and my collection ID, right? Name it as Appwrite collection ID, and the last variable would be Appwrite self sign, which would be set it to true. Okay, so to access this constants, I will create one more file. Now what would that file look like is, inside my services I would create an appwrite.dart file. Now this appwrite.dart file will be responsible to initialize my project with all the endpoints and project ID and rest of the stuffs, right? So how would I do that? So let's just import my Appwrite first, create an class Appwrite, create an instance, now we need a client object which will be initialized and used throughout our app to authenticate our user or access the database. So let's create an client object and create this Appwrite instance. Let's initialize this instance. Now inside this instance I will define this client. Now let's set this endpoint. Now we need to use this endpoints inside our client object, right? Now let's import this constants folder. we can simply type constants dot appwrite endpoint, and the spelling of endpoint is wrong, so let's just correct it. We also need to set the project ID, which would be constants dot, let's say, project ID, and my self assigned status equals to constants dot self assigned. Right, that's all I need to do to create an instance of my Appwrite. Now this instance or this client can be used to create objects of my account and database. For that, I will also create an authentication service which would be responsible to authenticate my user throughout my app, right? Now let's create a class known as auth service over here. Okay, auth service. Now this would have three classes: sign up, login, and let's say log out. So before getting started, now let's create an account instance or account object using our client object, which we have initialized in this Appwrite class. So let's say final account, it goes account, and to access the client, use Appwrite dot instance dot client. Now import this as file. Alright, we have created this account object. Now just simply we can create a sign up function. Now what this sign up function will require? It will require a name. Now I am making this name field compulsory for a user when it's signing up. You can make it optional, it's up to you. And email, and definitely a password. Right. Now before getting started, how we can create an account? You can just access this account object and click create. Now to make sure every user has a unique user ID, you can use simply id.unique, and there you go. Now to make sure all my fields are not null, I am making this parameters as required. Now this would create my account, right? But I need to map this object or the user which I am getting inside a field further in a future, right? So what I can do, instead of making this as a future void signup, I will make this a future. And what kind of future it would be? It would be something like import. I will be importing a model class, package models.dart, right? Models.dart, and this will be imported as models. Now simply you can select models and user. Now if you hover over this user object, you can see it contains a predefined set of how a user would look like. Like suppose the user would have an ID, created ad, updated ad, name, password, and bunch of other stuff. Now if you have used any different older versions of Appwrite, or you are following any older versions of the tutorials of Appwrite, you must be seen that this user is an account because of the change in API, right? So if you are currently using Appwrite from today or in the future, this models.account has been replaced by models.user. Now this is how I would be creating my sign up. Just copy this method, and similarly I will be creating my login function. Now login would only require two parameters, which is name and email. Now how should I log in an user? So if you go to the documentation of Appwrite, go to account, and as you can see, there is a second method known as create email session. What does create email session do? Is allow the user to log into their account by providing a valid email and password, right? So that's what we need now. So you can just call this method as email session and remove this user ID. Now once my user is logged in, I need to get back the user which is currently logged in. I need to have the session of it, right? So to access this session, what I can do, if you scroll down on this accounts API page, you will see something known as get account, right? So what does it do is get currently logged in user data as a JSON object, right? The user which is currently logged into my app, I will get its details, to access the database or to define rules. So how can I get this user data, the details of the user? I will just return this user which is currently logged into my app. Right, and once my user is signed in, once my user has created an account, I want it to log in as well. So I can just call my login function at the end of my sign up. Alright, so that's how we create your sign up function, that's how you created your login function, and now we are left out with logout. So logout is fairly simple. What you need to do is, let's simply create a logout method. Now we have to log out a user, right? How can we log out a user? If you get back to the accounts API page into the documentation and scroll down, you will get something known as delete session. What does the delete session do? Is that log out the currently logged in user from all their account session across different devices, right? That's what we need into our logout method, right? So just use this account function, account object, and delete the session. Which session it needs to delete is the currently logged in session, and instead of being a simple void, it would be a future void, right? And I guess that's it, what I need to write on the logic part of my authentication. Now let's create a basic UI so that we can call these methods and create our user. So inside my screens, I will create a file known as authscreen.dart. Let's create a simple material.dart, a stateful widget which says authscreen. Now instead of a placeholder, let's have a scaffold, and the scaffold body, at the center I have a text which says authscreen. And into my main application, let's just delete this all code because we don't need this code anymore, and also delete these boilerplate codes. So now just in case, I will be using material 3 so that all the styling is according to the material 3 styling. It doesn't change any functionality, it just changes the UI according to a material 3. And instead of passing my home page, I will be passing my authscreen. So if you reload your app, you can see you have your authscreen, right? Now let's start building some UI, right? So the first thing, let's replace this with a column, and if it's a column, I need to remove the const keyword. Inside as children, it would have a text form field, right? As you can see, this is my text form field. Now let's just give it some styling. Inside our column, make this a main axis alignment dot center. Right, now I have it on my center. Okay, I guess we'll need some bit of padding, so let's just wrap our column inside a padding and provide it a padding of 20. Yep, this looks good. Now okay, so I will be having 3 text form fields. This is my sign up page, right? I will be entering name, email and password. So for having 3 text field, I would be needing 3 text editing controllers. So let's create text editing controllers. Text editing controller, right? And similarly it would have an email controller and a password controller. Now let's give it some styling. Let's say first a controller, and the first one is a name controller. For giving some styling, provide the decoration, which would be an input decoration, and just a label text as name, label text, right? And also had a floating label behavior as floating behavior level dot always, right? Now just copy this so that I can have a similar 3 fields, and just change this name editing controller to email, change this label text to email, okay. Now we have 3 different text fields, right? Now what else do we need? We need a button, so let's add a bit of spacing using sized box. Give it a height of, let's say, 20, and provide it a elevated button. Elevated button. Make this on press as empty and provide it a text which says sign up. Alright, now we have a button. Let's also display a big text on top of the page. Which would be sign up. Give it a styling. I guess a font size of 30 would be fine. Let's add some weight. And yep, it looks good. Now, because we are developing this app using Appwrite and Flutter, it would look good if we can just display a logo of Appwrite and Flutter on the top of sign up, right? So let me just import an asset. Okay, so this is an Appwrite asset and it just contains a logo of Appwrite. To make sure I can use this into my Flutter app, go to your pubspec.yaml and change this assets folder. Now just type the name of the directory of your assets. In my case is simply assets, and enter a empty slash mark which will make sure that any asset which you include into this folder which will automatically be inserted into your Flutter app. So let's just use this asset. So, and where can we use this asset? Now as this is an SVG, we also need to add a dependency. If you're using VS Code and you are on Windows, click Ctrl Shift and P and click add dependency. Now you need to add a package which is Flutter SVG. Now on top of this we need a row widget, and it would have children's, let's say a Flutter logo. Flutter logo is a widget which comes out of the box in the Flutter SDK, so you don't have to download it from anywhere. Provide it a size of 80 and a size box with a width of, let's say, 20, and my SVG picture. So to use my SVG picture, it would be using svg picture.asset. So it should automatically import it. All right. So it's flutter svg.dart. I hope. Okay, what is the file which is getting imported? It should be flutter svg.dart. Right. Now I need to define the path of my assets. So it's just assets slash appwrite.svg and give it a size, let's say a height of 80, and click save. Let's see how does it look. Up, it looks good, and just make it in center. All right, doesn't look bad, right? Just give it a bit of sizing. Of 20, let's say. Yep, good to go. Now we also need a login page, right? This is a sign up page. Now they have different methods to add a login page also. You can create a different page. You can just update the UI present in the similar page. So what I will be doing is updating the state of the page inside this single page only. I won't be creating two different pages for login and sign up. So how we can do that, right? So for that, the first thing which we would be needing is a flag of, let's say, is sign up, and its current state would be true, right? So how would it change? Now let's say just add this const keyword. I'm using sign up, right? And I'm just checking here if this is a sign up. If the sign up flag is true, display the sign up text. Instead, display the login page. Now as you can see, this sign up is true, so I'm getting this sign up text, right? But if I set it to false and just reload my app, you will see the sign up text changes to a login text, right? Now this I have to do for several other fields. I have to also change my sign up text on my elevated button to login, and if it's a login page, I also need to remove this name section, right? Now how can I do that? Is simple. Above the text form field, I just need to add this check which says is sign up. Now you can see my name field has gone because the current state of my page is a login page, right? Now let's also update the text on my elevated button. So if it's a sign up page, sign up state, so sign up, else show sign login, right? Now we need a functionality so that we can change this state through our app and not by manually changing this into a code. So for that, what you can do is create something below this rich elevated button. I will be using a rich text because rich text allows you to style two different text in a single line according to your conditions. So it will be containing a text and a text span because I would be needing two different kind of text, right? I will be also needing two different kinds of widgets, so I will be using widget span. So this would contain children, two different children's. My first children would be again a text span. This text would depend if it's a sign up state. Then you can display a text something known as already have an account. And let's say if it's not a sign up page, then you can simply display don't have an account. Okay, don't have an account. I need some styling, basic styling. Let's say text style, let's give it a color, simply a black color, nothing much fancy. Okay, so as the current state of my app is a login page, a login screen, so I am getting this text known as don't have an account. Let's give it some spacing. Of 20 pixels. Yes, good to go. Now I need to give a toggle button so that the state can change. Now, once I have created this text, the next thing I would need is a widget span. Okay, all right, it's widget span. Now widget span would have a child, and this child would be inkwell. Now what's inkwell? It's a widget which listens to user interactions such as on tap, on double tap, on long press. So we will be having something as on tap, and we will be defining on tap, and inside this text it would depend upon the state. If it's is sign up, so display the text login. If it's not, then display the text as sign up. And I want this text to be underlined. Okay, am I missing something? All right. I would be needing a child for this. And okay, just format it so that the code is more readable. Okay, now let's give it a styling. A text style, and the decoration would be a underline. Okay, this looks good. Now if I click on sign up, nothing happens. So to update the UI, into my on tap function I would call set state and just reverse the state of my is sign up. Like if it's true, change it to false. If it's false, change it to true. So it would be something like is sign up. So just reverse the current state. So now currently it's false. As soon as I click on sign up, you can see the text changes to sign up. My name field currently appears. The text on the elevated button also changes, and the text which is on the bottom which says already have an account, login. So as you can see, now I can toggle between both the states, which is login and sign up, on my Flutter app. So I guess we are done with the UI. Now let's move forward and actually authenticate the user using the fields which are entered in these forms. How we can do that, right? Okay, just a second. we would be creating an function known as submit, which would be responsible for submitting all the responses which the user enters to our authentication services and make sure the authentication process is completed. Now inside this function, let's use a try and catch block, and if the current state of my app is sign up, so is sign up, what we need to do is create an auth class. Right now, to access the auth services which we have created here, we have to be creating an object of this class. So let's do that. Below this sign up flag, let's create an auth service object. Alright, so now we can use the auth service. We got to use await and mark this function as asynchronous. Auth service dot call this sign up function. Now you need to provide all the required named parameters. Now for name, you can just simply use name controller dot text. For email, you can use email controller dot text, and for password, you can simply use password controller dot text. Right, and if it's not sign up, then obviously it's an login state. So just use the same method, auth service dot login, and it would use email controller dot text and password controller dot text. Now one more thing which you need to do is just clear all the fields as soon as a sign up button is clicked. So how you can do is name controller dot clear, just change it to email controller and password controller. The same thing needs to be done onto my login state as well. So let's just paste this part, and onto my sign up screen, what I need is, as soon as a sign up method is clicked, I want the state of my app to change from sign up to sign and login state, right? So let's just change the state. Okay, so I guess this is pretty much, this will handle all our authentication objects. Now let's handle this catch error block, right? And what I can do is, let's say inside my widgets, I can create an file as utils.dart and create a scaffold messenger or a snack bar simply. So it would be flutter material.dart. Where's material.dart? Yep, there it goes. So I will create a snack bar. So it would be named my own snack bar, something like this. Now it would contain a string which would be the content which the snack bar needs to show, and it would simply return a snack bar. Now this content would be the content which the user is getting, or else, and this would be inside a text widget, right? So it would be a content, or simply an error occurred. Okay, this is my utils. Now I need to pass this error which I might get during my authentication process to this snack bar so that the user can see what kind of errors he or she is getting. So for that, I would be creating two different objects, one for navigation and one for a messenger. How I can do that is, let's say I have a final let's say messenger, and this would be a scaffold messenger dot of context. Now how would this work is simply into my catch block I would call this messenger and call the snow snack bar function and call my own snack bar, what was the name of my snack bar? Okay, my own snack bar, and just make this a proper camel case. It should import it. Okay, why isn't it importing? Okay, I need to change this to my own snack bar, and yeah, there you go. And the error which I would be getting, I will convert into a string and show into my snack bar. Now what I want is, as soon as my authentication is complete, I want my user to navigate to a different screen, let's say home screen. So I would be creating an home screen into my screens folder. Home screen, okay, it should be home screen dot dart, and it would be a simple stateful widget which would say home screen, and this would contain a scaffold. Inside the scaffold it would have a body. Inside a body it would just simply display a text which would say authenticated successfully. Authenticated, right? I hope the spelling is correct. Alright, so as I created this messenger object, I would also create a navigator object, so just to make my life more simpler. So it would be like a navigator, final navigator, which I can use as navigator dot of context. Now where would I be using it? As soon as my app logins. So once my user logged in, and inside my try block I would be using this navigator dot push, and I need to provide a route. Let's say I would provide a material route, material page route. It would need a context, and it would be navigated to my home screen. Now the last step which is left to use is to call this submit function as soon as the fields are submitted, right? So where will I call this submit function? Just scroll down, and inside your password field click on field submitted. It will return a value. I don't need that value. I would just call my submit function, and because this is a password field, I will make the obscure text property as true. And let's just reload this app. Okay, let's start creating an account. Okay, we don't have an account right currently, so let's change our app state to sign up, and let's enter a name, enter any random or sample email ID, enter your password, and click sign up. Okay, Let's see if our user, okay, we got an error which says the project with the request ID would not be found. Okay, let's see what's the error. Appwrite exception, project with the requested ID online project header to ensure that the project, okay, we need to make sure we are using the correct project ID. So where have we defined my project ID? Into my constant up. All right, we haven't defined any project ID database ID. Now, okay, let's go to my Appwrite console, go to my settings. This is my project ID, copy it, paste it over here. Let's also provide my database ID. Go to my database, this is my database ID, and also my collection ID, which is this. All right, and because I've changed the name, all right, now let's just rerun our app and see. Reload it. Enter your details, let's say an email ID and the password. Click on enter and it says unauthorized scope. Okay, let's see where we are missing. It says invalid credentials. Okay, let's move to my dashboard and simply delete this currently present users. All right, like we need to debug it. I don't know where the error is coming from. Let's just try once again. My email and I would give a password. It says unauthorized scope, please check email and password. Okay, let's just debug our app. Into my authentication screen. Alright, this looks good. Move to my authentication, account.create. Okay, this looks good. Okay, so I debugged the app and the only fix I found was just restarting the application, right? So just click on sign up, enter your name, enter an email ID and then password and click sign up. So as you can see, you are authenticated successfully. Now this was a part of sign up. Now if you want to log into your app, just reload this, enter the credentials which you just entered to create your account, enter your password and click on login. So you can see you can get this page authenticated successfully. So this was all for this video. Now in the next video we have as soon as we have created our account, we'll take a step forward and use our database to create a Todo application using Appwrite's inbuilt database services. So thank you and see you in the next video.